Before Italian food became mainstream in America, these dinners had nothing to do with menus, trends, or comfort. They were cooked quietly in immigrant kitchens, long before pizza and red sauce defined the culture. This video uncovers what Italian families actually ate when they first arrived, at a time when money was scarce, workdays were long, and survival shaped every meal. These dishes were built from beans, bread, bitter greens, and memory, repeated night after night to feed entire households. Meat was rare, portions were small, and nothing went to waste. Every dinner carried the weight of sacrifice and the hope of something better. What you are about to see is not romanticized food history. It is the reality that sustained millions of Italian immigrants before their cuisine was accepted, celebrated, or commercialized. To understand modern Italian food in America, you must first understand these forgotten dinners, because everything that came later was built on them. Before Italian food became popular in America, pasta e fagioli was not a comfort dish. It was a necessity. For Italian immigrant families, this meal meant survival on weeks when wages barely covered rent. Beans mattered more than pasta. Meat was optional, often missing, and sometimes remembered only by flavor left in the pot. Dried beans simmered for hours while parents worked long shifts, filling small apartments with a smell that promised dinner would happen. Pasta was added last, stretched thin so every bowl looked full. This was not restaurant pasta e fagioli. There were no thick broths or heavy cheese. The soup was simple, pale, and modest. Garlic, onion, and oil did most of the work. Some families added a spoon of tomato when they could afford it. Others never did. What mattered was warmth, calories, and silence at the table while everyone ate. Children learned this dish early because it returned often. It appeared on Mondays, then again on Thursdays, and sometimes for lunch the next day. It taught patience and restraint. Leftovers were expected. Nothing was thrown away. Pasta e fagioli followed immigrants from southern Italy into American cities like New York, Boston, and Chicago. It adapted without losing its purpose. This meal did not try to impress neighbors. It fed families quietly, consistently, and without complaint. Before Italian food became mainstream, this was Italian cooking. No menus. No applause. Just beans, pasta, and the quiet understanding that tomorrow, the pot might need to stretch even further. It was passed down without measurements, written recipes, or ceremony, carried by repetition and memory. Long before fame followed Italian cuisine, this dish proved that simple food could hold families together, even when money failed and the future felt uncertain. For many homes, survival tasted like this, night after night. Before Italian food reached American restaurants, polenta was a daily reality for immigrant families. It was not served as a side or dressed with rich sauces. It was the meal itself. Cornmeal cooked slowly in water, stirred until thick, then poured onto a board to cool and set. One pot fed everyone. No plates were needed. Slices were cut and shared without ceremony. Polenta followed families from northern Italy into crowded American cities, where cornmeal was cheap and filling. Meat was rare. Cheese was limited. Most nights, polenta was eaten plain or topped with onions, greens, or whatever scraps remained from earlier meals. Some families fried leftovers the next morning to make the meal last longer. This dish demanded time, not money. Someone stood at the stove stirring for nearly an hour, usually after returning from factory work. Children learned early that patience mattered. If polenta burned, dinner was ruined. There was no backup meal. Polenta appeared often during winter, when jobs slowed and cupboards emptied faster. It warmed kitchens and filled stomachs without asking questions. It did not change much from day to day, and that consistency brought comfort when everything else felt uncertain. Before Italian food became mainstream, polenta symbolized endurance. It was humble, repetitive, and honest. No one praised it. No one complained. It simply did its job. These dinners taught immigrant families how to survive America before success arrived. Long before Italian cuisine gained respect, Polenta quietly sustained households, reminding everyone at the table that fullness mattered more than flavor and survival mattered more than choice. This meal shaped memories, habits, and expectations. It trained families to endure repetition and scarcity together. Polenta was not nostalgia then. It was necessity, shared in silence, eaten quickly, and trusted to carry everyone through another demanding day without complaint. Before Italian food gained acceptance in America, cicoria and beans kept families alive. Cicoria meant wild greens, often dandelion, gathered wherever they grew. Immigrants recognized these plants immediately because hunger had trained their eyes back home. Beans simmered slowly while greens were washed, chopped, and boiled until bitterness softened. Olive oil finished the pot, when oil existed. This dinner was not chosen. It was gathered. Children learned to spot edible greens along rail lines, vacant lots, and riverbanks. What could be picked for free mattered more than what could be bought. Cicoria and beans appeared when pay envelopes were thin and winters were long. The meal tasted sharp and earthy. No sauce hid the flavor. Bread helped, tearing bitterness down to something manageable. Some families added garlic. Others added nothing. The pot was meant to stretch, not impress. Cicoria and beans traveled from southern Italy into American cities without changing its role. It fed bodies worn down by factory shifts and construction work. It returned often, sometimes twice a week, because survival favored reliability. Before Italian food went mainstream, this dish represented knowledge passed quietly between generations. Knowing which greens were safe meant dinner. Knowing how long to boil them meant relief. Mistakes mattered. This was Italian cooking before fame. No restaurant would serve it. No cookbook recorded it. Yet it endured because it worked. For many immigrant households, cicoria and beans proved that survival depended on memory as much as money. Long before Italian food earned praise, this meal sustained families through scarcity, repetition, and the daily work of starting over in an unfamiliar land. It asked nothing from America, yet gave strength, continuity, and dignity to people rebuilding lives, proving that humble food could anchor identity when everything else felt temporary during those earliest immigrant years in America. Before Italian food became familiar to Americans, bread and tomatoes formed entire dinners. This meal did not require a stove, money, or time. It relied on what almost every immigrant kitchen had, day after day. Stale bread, a few tomatoes, olive oil if luck allowed. When cupboards were empty, this meal still appeared. Bread was never thrown away. Loaves hardened on shelves until they were sliced thick and revived with tomato juice and oil. Fresh tomatoes were crushed by hand, salted lightly, then spooned over bread to soften it. Some families rubbed garlic on the crust. Others did not. The goal was not flavor. The goal was to eat. This dinner came from southern Italy, where poverty taught restraint long before immigration. In America, it became even more important. Rent came first. Food adjusted. Bread and tomatoes filled gaps when wages failed to stretch. Children learned early that this meal meant a tight week. There was no complaint. Everyone understood. Bread absorbed tomato and oil slowly, turning dryness into something filling enough to quiet hunger. This was not bruschetta. There were no toppings, no garnish, no presentation. It was eaten standing, sitting on steps, or around bare tables. It fed families returning late from work, too tired to cook. Before Italian food went mainstream, this meal defined discipline. It taught families how to accept simplicity without shame. It proved that a meal did not need abundance to be complete. Long before Italian cuisine became celebrated, bread and tomatoes carried families through difficult seasons. It was quiet food eaten without ceremony, remembered not for taste, but for reliability. In immigrant kitchens, survival often looked like this: a slice of bread, a crushed tomato, and the understanding that tomorrow demanded strength again, and dinner only needed to be enough to make that possible for everyone at the table. Before Italian food found a place in American restaurants, onion and potato frittata was a dependable dinner in immigrant homes. It appeared on nights when little else was available, yet eggs still sat in the kitchen. This dish was not breakfast. It was supper, eaten slowly and shared evenly. Eggs were valuable. They stretched food budgets and filled stomachs without meat. Potatoes added weight and assurance. Onions brought sweetness when nothing else could. Everything was sliced thin and cooked gently in oil, then bound together with beaten eggs. The pan mattered. The heat mattered. Burning it meant no dinner. This meal came together quickly, usually after long workdays. It was cooked by memory, not measurement. No herbs were required. Cheese was optional and often absent. What mattered was balance, making sure every slice held the same amount so no one felt shorted. Frittata nights followed difficult weeks. When wages fell behind rent, eggs saved the table. Leftovers were eaten cold the next morning, tucked into bread or wrapped in paper for work lunches. Children learned this dish as part of routine. They watched it flip in the pan, careful and practiced. Mistakes were rare because experience demanded precision. There was no room for waste. Before Italian food went mainstream, frittata represented restraint and trust. It trusted simple ingredients to carry families through. It trusted cooks to stretch food without complaint. This was Italian cooking before attention and praise. No sauce. No garnish. No names spoken aloud. Just slices passed hand to hand. Long before Italian cuisine gained recognition, onion and potato frittata fed immigrant families quietly. It offered protein, warmth, and consistency in uncertain times. It taught households that a complete meal did not need luxury, only care. For many, this dish became proof that survival could still taste like effort, memory, and shared responsibility at the table. Before Italian food became popular in America, simple vegetable minestrone was a cornerstone of immigrant dinners. This soup was not elaborate or served to impress. It was practical, nourishing, and designed to stretch every available ingredient. Families used whatever vegetables they could afford or gather: cabbage, carrots, onions, beans, or leafy greens, boiled together until soft. Water, olive oil, and a pinch of salt completed the pot. Minestrone demanded patience. The longer it simmered, the more the flavors melded. It was often prepared in the morning and left to cook slowly while parents worked long shifts. Children learned early that minestrone was a test of attention. Too much heat could ruin it, too little could leave it undercooked. Meat was rare and added only when there was extra money. For most households, minestrone was vegetarian out of necessity. Bread accompanied the soup, dipped into the liquid to make each portion feel larger. No measurements guided this cooking. Mothers and grandmothers relied entirely on memory, instinct, and the need to feed hungry mouths. This dish was eaten repeatedly, sometimes appearing 2 or 3 times in a single week. Consistency was essential. Families depended on it for survival, not enjoyment. Its taste was honest, unadorned, and filling, carrying both the flavor of the old country and the reality of immigrant life in America. Before Italian food went mainstream, vegetable minestrone was Italian cooking at its most humble. No restaurants recorded it. No cookbooks celebrated it. Yet it endured, sustaining families quietly, nourishing bodies, and preserving a sense of routine amidst hardship. Minestrone taught lessons that went beyond food: patience, resourcefulness, and endurance. It held families together, filling empty stomachs and tired hands alike. For Italian immigrants, this simple soup was proof that even the plainest meal could support survival, memory, and identity in a foreign land. Before Italian food became popular in America, pasta with sardines was a common dinner in immigrant homes. This was not the rich seafood pasta served in restaurants today. Sardines were inexpensive, canned or salted, and provided vital protein for families on tight budgets. Pasta, usually spaghetti or macaroni, was cooked plain, then combined with sardines, olive oil, and occasionally a sprinkle of breadcrumbs or garlic. This meal appeared when money was low, yet nourishment was needed. Sardines were stretched carefully. Bones were removed when possible, but children often learned to eat around them. The dish was simple, quick, and sustaining, perfect for evenings after long workdays in factories or construction. Flavor was secondary to function. The oil carried richness, while pasta added bulk. Sometimes a few leftover vegetables were added, but mostly this was a dish of necessity. It was eaten standing over the stove, at a small table, or in a shared kitchen with neighbors. No one complained. Everyone understood that survival came first. This pasta and sardine combination traveled from southern Italy to crowded American cities, retaining its humble origins. It was repeated week after week, teaching children that food could be both filling and minimal. There was no presentation, no garnish, and no expectation of praise. Before Italian cuisine became mainstream, this meal represented adaptability and resourcefulness. It carried the flavors and lessons of Italy while adjusting to scarcity in America. Pasta with sardines kept families alive, teaching them endurance and creativity in the kitchen. Long before Italian food was trendy, this dish provided nourishment, consistency, and quiet comfort for immigrant households struggling to survive in a new land. Before Italian food became widely popular in America, homemade gnocchi was a humble but essential dinner for many immigrant families. Unlike the soft, pillowy gnocchi seen in restaurants today, these dumplings were simple, sturdy, and filling. Made from leftover potatoes, flour, and sometimes a little egg, they were hand-rolled and cut into small pieces to feed entire households. This dish required patience and practice. Children often helped, learning to roll and shape each piece while listening to stories of the old country. Gnocchi nights were family affairs, and every dumpling mattered. The meal was inexpensive but nourishing, stretching scarce ingredients to their fullest potential. Sauces were rare. A drizzle of olive oil, a few sautéed onions, or a spoonful of tomato was sometimes added when affordable. Cheese was a luxury, rarely included. The focus was on sustenance rather than flavor or presentation. Gnocchi traveled from Italian villages into American kitchens without changing its purpose. It appeared when potatoes were plentiful, often after a market visit or harvest. Leftovers were eaten cold the next day or reheated for breakfast, proving the dish's versatility. Before Italian food became mainstream, gnocchi represented ingenuity and endurance. It carried the memory of home while adapting to life in a new country. This was food built from necessity, shared quietly, and repeated with care. For immigrant families, homemade gnocchi was more than a meal. It was survival, continuity, and connection. Long before Italian cuisine earned acclaim, this simple dish fed hungry mouths, preserved cultural memory, and taught the next generation the value of patience, skill, and making every ingredient count. Before Italian food became popular in America, stuffed peppers were a practical and nourishing dinner in immigrant homes. Unlike the elaborate versions served in restaurants today, these peppers were filled with simple ingredients: rice, leftover vegetables, sometimes beans, and occasionally a small portion of meat when money allowed. Each pepper was carefully cleaned, filled, and baked until soft, providing a complete meal for the family. This dish required precision. Overstuffed peppers could spill in the oven, undercooked peppers were bitter and hard. Mothers and grandmothers learned the balance through experience, teaching children the importance of care in cooking. Every ingredient was used efficiently. Nothing went to waste. Stuffed peppers appeared most often when fresh produce was available at markets or from local gardens. They were flexible. Peppers could be green, red, or yellow, and fillings adjusted according to what was on hand. Olive oil added flavor, and tomatoes or a bit of broth kept the peppers moist. Before Italian food became mainstream, this dish represented adaptability and resourcefulness. It was not about presentation or taste alone. It was about feeding hungry mouths with limited means. Meals like this shaped routines and expectations, reinforcing the idea that survival often depended on careful planning and creativity. For Italian immigrant families, stuffed peppers were more than food. They were lessons in patience, economy, and resilience. Long before Italian cuisine gained popularity in America, this humble dish provided nourishment, comfort, and a quiet reminder that even simple ingredients could create something sustaining and meaningful at the family table. Before Italian food became mainstream in America, beans and bitter greens were a staple dinner for immigrant families. This dish was not prepared for flavor or celebration, it was prepared for survival. Beans provided protein and substance, while bitter greens, such as dandelion or escarole, added nutrition and variety when meat and vegetables were scarce. Olive oil and a pinch of salt completed the meal. This dinner was repeated often, appearing 2 or 3 times each week. Children learned to appreciate the texture and taste, even when it was sharp or strong. Families ate together quietly, understanding that the pot had to feed everyone and nothing could be wasted. Beans and greens traveled from southern Italy into crowded American neighborhoods without losing their purpose. Cooking was done slowly, over low heat, with care and attention. Leftovers were common, eaten the next day or stretched to feed extra mouths. Nothing extravagant was required. The meal depended entirely on simple, affordable ingredients. Before Italian food became popular in restaurants and cookbooks, this dish represented resilience and resourcefulness. It taught families how to survive, adapt, and make limited resources last. There was no presentation, no garnish, and no expectation of praise. For immigrant households, beans and bitter greens were more than sustenance. They provided nourishment, routine, and continuity during difficult times. Long before Italian cuisine gained fame in America, this humble dinner carried families through scarcity, hardship, and uncertainty, proving that the simplest meals could hold the deepest meaning and strongest connections at the table.